Hello everyone and welcome to Guild Wars 2 Daily. Today we're going to be looking at lore, and the footage in the background comes in once again from Guild Wars Online. We'll probably have stitched together loads of their shorter ones. I actually think yesterday's episode had footage that we'd already used before, so I hadn't realised that, so I'll just try and stitch together a lot of the more short ones. And yeah, before we really start off with the lore though, just to let you guys know, it'll probably be a little bit of a shorter episode today. I'm kind of running around like a headless chicken for beta tomorrow. And also, if you're interested, the channel on YouTube just called Lore, they do summaries of games in 60 seconds or around a minute. They actually released one for Guild Wars today, so you can check that out if you want. It's got a lot of people talking about it. Really, it's honestly, in my personal opinion, not amazing, especially for Guild Wars 2, because it's just like pre-prophecies lore, so it doesn't even go into the story at all of what happens throughout the events of Guild Wars 1, let alone what leads up to Guild Wars 2, and it even is slightly wrong in certain places. It seems to suggest that you played Guild Wars 1 participating in the Guild Wars, which is just way off. But anyway, if you are interested, that's going to be kind of similar to what I'm hoping to do with my lore summary series, except mine's going to be a lot more extensive. Like, it's going to be many videos and all of them around 10 minutes long, so we actually do learn all of the stuff we really need to know. But yeah, that did come out and everybody's talking about it, so I thought I'd just give my personal views on the video itself. But yeah, so 2 questions today. First one was asked by Destructive Purpose, who said, I've got a lore question. It says in the Guild Wars wiki that the Shatterer and Tequatl the Sunless are Elder Dragon champions. Are they themselves dragons? They appear to be so. And also, where did they come from? Also, why did the Elder Dragons, like Prime Orders, have a champion such as the Great Destroyer, who appears to be much than the Shatterer and Tequatl, if other lesser dragons, or whatever they are, exist? So, a lot of questions. First thing, you say that the Great Destroyer appears much weaker than like the Shatterer and Tequatl. Now, the truth is, the Shatterer and Tequatl look much more impressive in the new game, of course. They're much bigger, and these are fights on a scale we never really experienced in Guild Wars 1. We did have some fights against some pretty giant stuff in Guild Wars 1, but really, as far as those guys go, they really do dwarf the Great Destroyer. However, if you look at this from a lore perspective, and not necessarily a mechanical or how things appear in-game perspective, actually, the Great Destroyer completely seems to dwarf these other creatures in significance. I mean, the Great Destroyer, it took an entire race of ancient creatures to essentially destroy themselves and invoke some great legend and some great rite that would forever change them and essentially doom the entire race just to destroy this one champion. And then you look at books like Edge of Destiny, very minor spoilers, but they go hunting champions in Edge of Destiny, and sometimes you get like 1 chapter's worth of information, and really it's just described as a bit of a fight between 5 people, and they're taking out these other ones so much easier. The Great Destroyer really is this mammoth in lore. It's so much more significant and seemingly powerful than any of the other Elder Dragons champions or lieutenants seem to have been able to handle. Speaking of which, you do have Tequatl and the Shatterer. The Shatterer being a minion of Kralkatorrik, and Tequatl the Sunless being a minion of Zaitan. Now, the Shatterer itself is actually just a name, or a rank rather, given to a dragon, a powerful dragon, under Kralkatorrik's control. When you defeat the Shatterer in that event, no matter how rare that's going to be in-game, you actually do kill that being. That entity is destroyed, and then Kralkatorrik, through whatever means, actually manufactures, so shall we say, or creates another version of the Shatterer, and then that will step up and have the rank itself. So we're assuming that this kind of chain happens through all of the Elder Dragons, but we haven't actually had a lore interview specifically stating that this is what happens with Tequatl as well. We just know that Tequatl is one of Zaitan's lieutenants and champions. There are very specific ranks in the way that these Elder Dragons seem to have formed themselves, and it certainly seems like there is room, as I mentioned in another episode, for more than one of these champions to exist at a time. But onto your other questions, yes, they can also be dragons. They quite clearly look very much like dragons. They're not like encroaching on what it is to be an elder dragon by just being in a dragon form themselves. Not all champions will look that way. The Great Destroyer, for example, definitely didn't look that way. And you can look again into the Edge of Destiny book. You can read many descriptions of lots of different champions in that book, and they're not all dragons, nowhere near. In fact, Zaitan's, one of his champions at one point, just comes across as like an undead, just like not necessarily anything like a dragon. And it goes further than that, that even if these champions do look like dragons, they're actually much more intelligent in a way that we as humans playing a game and the actual races of Tyria understand. These are the guys that actually coordinate attacks and decide where troops go and how to create more minions and things like this. The Elder Dragons themselves are just powerful entities, powerful forces that affect the world and move the world in certain ways and suffer from an everlasting hunger. That's really all that they are. We haven't heard of them thinking in a conventional means. It's actually the lesser dragons that actually do this kind of stuff. So there are distinctions here, even if they are still in a dragon shape. And essentially, we still don't know that much about the dragons, but that's a lot of what we know, that they have chosen these creatures to be a part of their hierarchies, and they are replaced once they've been destroyed. And in some cases, these things can be so old that you've got a race as old as the dwarves describing them in their ancient texts, as the Great Destroyer was described in the Tome of Rubicon. So yeah, very interesting what's going to be happening with the champions. And I am still wondering what will happen with the event boss like Tequatl the Sunless. Once we've completed our personal story and Zaitan is defeated in whatever manner that happens, how is it that his champion still going to be spawning in the real world? I mean, that's going to have to happen, but why? What is the lore explanation for that? Can these things continue to exist once their masters are dead? Well, if we look at Glint and possibly Kunavang, then it would certainly seem so. It's just who's deciding who the next champion is once one's been defeated. And in the case of Primordus and the Great Destroyer as well, the Great Destroyer becoming active and moving around and releasing destroyers all throughout the depths of Tyria just kind of announced the soon awakening of Primordus. And when the Great Destroyer is destroyed, Primordus moves slightly. You see his eye open. He doesn't fully wake up then. He doesn't wake up fully for another 50 years. But you can see there is some kind of connection there, so I'm curious to see how these champions will continue to play out. We can even look at Rotscale as well, who could potentially, in Guild Wars 1's time, be the remaining champion of Zaitan, while Zaitan's still asleep. Okay, and the second question was asked by Hetzimarcel1, who said, if the divine aura blinds all humans, then why weren't we blinded when we witnessed Cormyr becoming a god? Is this because we were ascended, or is there another explanation? So this ties into the Malkor thing. There was a lot of really cool discussion because of the Malkor thing. And yeah, this is a really good question. So you mentioned here first this divine aura. For anyone who didn't watch the previous Guild Wars 2 Daily, there's a story that describes the fact that human eyes cannot look upon the gods for too long, for they get blinded if they do, because of this divine aura emanating from the gods. There's actually a further developer quote that I didn't mention that people have been pointing out, where they say that essentially Malkor himself really avoided becoming blinded himself by looking very briefly at the gods so that he wouldn't be blinded, though that all that stuff I said about him potentially being of another race still does count. But this is kind of what the divine aura is. And the other thing you mention is Ascension. For anyone who doesn't know what Ascension is, this was a process players went through in prophecies and to an extent in factions as well, where humans, specific humans, the chosen humans, can perform a ritual to make themselves spiritually closer to the gods. And this would come with various benefits for these humans. For example, they would be given the gift of true sight, and this is what they needed to be able to see the Masat, powerful spellcasters that were making themselves invisible to all those who weren't ascended themselves. So that was Ascension, right? Becoming closer to the gods. In factions, there was a similar process called Weno Su, which some people say is the same as Ascension. It's just like the Canthan culture's version of it. Some people say it's something completely different, because this is more, Weno Su is more in reference to the Canthan celestial pantheon, the celestial creatures that they seem to worship almost in a godlike way in Cantha that no one else on the rest of Tyria seems to worship. So it could be a slightly different process, but in terms of game mechanics, it opens up the same thing. It gives you the same benefits. However, in Nightfall, there was no such thing as Ascension. So when you ask, why weren't we blind when we witnessed Cormyr becoming a god? We can't say that's just because everybody's become ascended, because you can't necessarily guarantee factions players or factions heroes or factions henchmen that might have been there at the end of Nightfall to have witnessed that, and you can't guarantee Nightfall characters themselves were also ascended. So we can't exactly say it's because of Ascension or becoming close to the gods. I personally like to believe that we didn't actually see Cormyr, the goddess, when she ascended. I like to believe when we saw her run into all the power that was being released from Abaddon as he died, that was the last we saw of her as a mortal. And then there was that big kind of glow, and then she stepped back out. I like to believe that that thing we saw stand back out wasn't Cormyr, the godly entity, but rather immediately she'd sent her avatar down, and her as a god, in god form perhaps, had already been evaporated and turned somewhere else into the mist where mortal eyes wouldn't see them. So I like to think that was the avatar of Cormyr we were seeing there. And in fact, later on, you can go and kneel at a statue to summon her avatar to access the end game stuff in Nightfall. And the thing that pops out to talk to you looks very similar to what we saw there come out of Abaddon's mouth, essentially, when he was destroyed. So I like to think it was her avatar, which is why we are not blinded by Cormyr instantly. And really, how she looks as a god, the humans don't know. Maybe they've never seen Cormyr in a godly form. Because if you look at a statue that, of course, was not crafted by Malcor himself, because this was many years later, the statue is actually based on Cormyr as we knew her in life, with her blindfold, and more things have been added, like a book. But it's essentially still her as a human, just with minor alterations. So I like to think maybe we haven't seen Cormyr as a god. A more interesting topic is when we see fallen gods, like we have seen Abaddon in one form at least, maybe not his humanoid godly form he had before he was banished to the realm of torment, but we have seen him as kind of this giant bestial thing, and we weren't blinded. And we also saw Doom in the underworld in what looked like a very traditional godly form that was very similar to the way we picture the other gods, and seeing him also didn't blind us. So maybe this radiance only comes when a god is active, shall we say. But then the question becomes, what means a god's active? And you can go a lot further than that. But yeah, I like to think it was an avatar in answer to your question, but once again, we don't know 100%. Anyway, there we go, guys. That was Guild Wars 2 Daily for today. Now, tomorrow I am going to be starting to do all of my beta footage stuff. I've got a lot of plans, as I've said many times. Guild Wars 2 Daily for the weekend, Friday and the weekend. I think it will probably be not questions and answers. It might be the first time Guild Wars 2 Daily's changed into something other than questions and answers. I think I might just talk to you about my general beta experiences and how things have gone. And hopefully I can start to release content as soon as possible. One of the first videos I'm hoping to have up is going to be a full run around in Lion's Arch, where we find all of the points of interest and cool stuff like that, assuming that's all there. So you can probably start seeing content from me very, very quickly. I want to be on top of the pile, so to speak. But yeah, Guild Wars 2 Daily will continue, and it'll probably just be my general impressions, unless you guys hate that idea, in which case please feel free to leave a comment down below. But yeah, thanks very much, guys. Thanks to Guild Wars Online once again, and I will see you tomorrow.